Welcome to The Explainer, everyone. Today, we're taking a deep dive into the fascinating and literally life-saving world of lung anatomy and the respiratory system. If you've been looking for a clear, beginner-friendly guide to how your human lungs actually work, well, you're in the exact right place. We're going to keep things simple but incredibly accurate. Okay, let's jump right in.
But first, let's kick things off with a little trivia to test your anatomy knowledge right out of the gate. Have you ever wondered why your right lung is noticeably wider but actually shorter than your left lung? I know, it sounds like a total paradox, right? Let's figure out exactly why that is. To get started, we really need to look at the big picture. We're looking at the lungs exactly as they sit, resting perfectly on both sides of the mediastinum right inside the thorax. You have to remember, your organs don't exist in a vacuum. They have to share space. Notice how the liver sits just inferior or below the right lung. That actually pushes the right dome of the diaphragm higher up. Meanwhile, your heart sits slightly off to the left, which completely steals space from the left lung. So putting all that together, the right lung has to sit higher and shorter just to make room for that massive liver below it. But because the left lung is narrower to accommodate the cardiac impression from the heart, the right lung actually ends up being wider, heavier, and has a significantly greater overall capacity. It's just a beautiful functional example of anatomical real estate. Now, before we zoom in on the specific structures, let's get perfectly clear on what these massive organs actually do. The ultimate function of the lungs is respiration. Basically, they act like a giant biological pump to bring in oxygen and release carbon dioxide. But here's the thing. There are actually two types of respiration. External respiration is what we typically think of as breathing, literally moving air from the outside environment into the tiny alveoli in your lungs. Internal respiration, on the other hand, happens deep down at the cellular level, where the blood physically exchanges those gases with your body's cells. All right, moving on to section 1, surfaces and borders, mapping the lungs. If you look at the overall shape, each lung is conical. They have this rounded apex sitting right up top. And get this, it actually rises above your first rib and clavicle. Down below, they have a broad, somewhat concave base that rests perfectly on the dome of the diaphragm. What's really cool here is how the organ is defined by three very distinct surfaces. You've got the outer costal surface that rubs right against your ribs, the bottom diaphragmatic surface, and the intermedial surface that faces the dead center of your chest. Now, looking closely at the sharp anterior border of the left lung, you can distinctly see the evidence of that anatomical real estate we just talked about. Notice that deep indentation? That is the cardiac notch, and it's created specifically by the apex of the heart pressing into it. And right below that notch, there's a neat little tongue-like projection of lung tissue called the lingula, which makes perfect sense because it literally translates to little tongue in Latin. That medial surface, the interface of the lungs we mentioned, is just absolutely packed with impressions from its neighboring structures. Because lung tissue is quite soft and spongy, the surrounding organs leave permanent physical imprints right on them. The right lung has very distinct grooves for the azygos vein and the superior and inferior vena cava. The left lung, conversely, tightly hugs the major blood vessels of the heart, showing deep, obvious grooves for both the aortic arch and the descending aorta. Section 2. The hilum en route, the gateway. Here's where things get really interesting. How do air and blood actually get inside this massive organ? Take a look at that indented area on the medial surface. That right there is the pulmonary hilum. You can think of it as essentially the power plug of the lung. It's a triangular depression where the visceral pleura, that's the membrane covering the lung itself, meets the parietal pleura. This spot is the exact gateway where vital structures enter and exit the lung. And as those membranes extend downwards, they form a narrow fold called the pulmonary ligament. Through that hilum passes what we call the pulmonary route, which is a tight collection of bronchi, arteries, and veins. Want a great trick for remembering how these are laid out? Just look at the sequence from top to bottom. For the right lung, use the acronym BAV. That's bronchus at the top, artery in the middle, and vein at the bottom. For the left lung, it shifts just a bit to ABV, artery on top, bronchus in the middle, veins at the bottom. Seriously, keep that little mnemonic in your back pocket. It is a lifesaver for anatomy tests. Moving right along to section 3, lobes and segments, functional puzzle pieces. So the lungs aren't just single solid balloons, not at all. They are divided into distinct lobes by deep cracks, which we call fissures. The right lung is broken up into 3 distinct lobes, the superior, the middle, and the inferior. And these are separated by the oblique and horizontal fissures. Because the left lung is slightly smaller, remember, it only has 2 lobes, the superior and inferior. And those are separated by a single, much steeper oblique fissure.
Now, if we zoom in even closer, those individual lobes are subdivided into what are known as bronchopulmonary segments. The absolutely crucial point to understand here, and this is super relevant clinically, is that these segments are completely independent physiological units. They're physically walled off from each other by a layer of connective tissue. This means a surgeon can actually go in and remove one single disease segment without ruining the function of any of the surrounding ones. It's pretty amazing. So, just how many of these independent units are we working with? Well, the larger right lung boasts 10 of these bronchopulmonary segments. The slightly smaller left lung contains 8. But the golden rule remains exactly the same for all of them. Every single segment is supplied by its very own dedicated segmental artery and its own segmental bronchus. It's just a brilliant marvel of biological engineering and built-in redundancy. Section 4. The bronchial tree, the upside-down forest. If you trace the path of the air you breathe in, it literally looks like an upside-down forest growing inside your chest. The bronchial tree starts at the trachea, or windpipe, which then bifurcates or splits into the right and left main bronchi. What's absolutely vital to grasp here is that this intricate network of conducting airways does absolutely nothing but transmit air. That's it. They are purely a transportation highway from the outside world. Zero gas exchange with your blood happens in this part of the tree. The air actually travels a very specific, highly branched path. It goes from the main bronchi, dividing into lobar bronchi for each lobe, and then down to the segmental bronchi for those individual functional segments we just talked about. From there, it keeps branching into subsegmental bronchi and finally narrows down into the tiny terminal bronchioles. With every single branch, these tubes get narrower, far more numerous, and increasingly embedded deep into the lung tissue. And at the very end of that long conducting line is the alveolar tree. This is it. This is where the magic of respiration actually takes place. Right past the terminal bronchioles, you find the respiratory bronchioles, then alveolar ducts, and finally the alveolar sacs. These are essentially bunches of microscopic grape-like bubbles called alveoli. This tiny, delicate surface is the exact site where oxygen finally crosses over into your blood and carbon dioxide crosses out so you can exhale it. Let's move to Section 5, pulmonary circulation, the dual blood supply. Okay, so air is only half the equation, right? We need blood to actually meet that air. Now, this part is very often misunderstood, so listen closely. The lungs actually have two completely separate parallel blood supply systems. You've got the bronchial circulation and the pulmonary circulation. The bronchial circulation is part of your systemic system. It brings fresh oxygenated blood from your aorta strictly to nourish the lung tissues themselves, literally just feeding the lung cells to keep them alive. But the pulmonary circulation, that's the system that handles the actual heavy lifting of gas exchange for the entire rest of your body. Let's quickly trace that massive pulmonary circulation pathway. Deoxygenated blood gets pumped out from the right ventricle of your heart straight through the pulmonary arteries. It travels all the way down into that microscopic alveolar network we just looked at. There, it dumps off its carbon dioxide, picks up a fresh load of oxygen, and then rushes right back to the left atrium of the heart through 4 pulmonary veins, completely ready to be pumped out to nourish the rest of your body. To quickly summarize this incredible journey from the macro down to the micro, first, remember that your human lungs are beautifully asymmetrical, specifically shaped to accommodate your heart and your liver and your liver. Second, their medial hilum acts as that vital structural gateway for the BAV and ABV root structures. And third, normal lung function relies entirely on a deeply branched bronchial tree to deliver the air, paired perfectly with that dual pulmonary circulation system to handle the blood. Every single breath you take is a testament to this flawless, fiercely independent structural design. If this explainer helped demystify lung anatomy for you and you want to keep mastering the human body without the textbook headache, make sure to subscribe for more simple visual medical explanations. So what surprised you the most about how your lungs are actually structured? Let me know in the comments. Keep learning, keep breathing, and I'll catch you in the next one.